Good afternoon, family and friends, for all you moms and dads out there who are doing remote learning. Thanks for tuning in. This is your afternoon lunch break story. Now, this story is called Old Neighbors, New Friends. Okay? Old Neighbors, New Friends. This is about a family who they live together next to each other for about 10 years, but their families before them had lived in those same two houses. And it was a white picket fence that separated both of the houses. And along that fence grew a bunch of really beautiful roses, all different types of roses, but they had, like the little thorns on those roses. So there's two little girls playing in this yard. And so the one on the right, she would run up to that fence and she would look over that fence at the other little girl in that yard. And every now and then they would be at that fence at the same time, but not really playing with each other and not really even speaking. So this one might jump rope. That one might, just be tossing up a ball. And the other one's just walking and kind of looking over the fence. So they noticed that each other every day around the same time. So they kept coming to that fence a little bit more. And then finally, the one on the left said, "Hey, my name is Sharita." She says, "Oh, hey, my name is Micaiah." Same name as me. And they look at each other and she says, "Well, you want to play together?" And she said, "No, I can't come across the fence. I'm going to get stuck with all the roses." And they said, "Well, maybe we should clear out a patch of the roses, and that way we can come to the same fence and we can cross the fence and come over and play with each other." I thought that was a pretty good idea. And so little bit by little bit, they kind of pulled away the roses, careful, trying not to get cut. And then one day, the little girl on the left, she didn't come to the fence for a really long time, like a week or 2 weeks. And this one would come to the fence and she thought, "Oh, she doesn't want to be my friend anymore." And so her mother noticed. She said, "I seen you outside playing with the little girl across the fence. Why don't you play with her anymore?" "I don't know, Mommy. She just went away. She just doesn't like me." Her mother said, "I don't know about that." She said, "Here, I have an idea." Her mother got together with her daughter and they baked some banana muffins. She said, "Now I want you to take those muffins to that fence. And if she comes out, tell her that your mother made these for her family." And she said, "Okay, that's a good idea." And so her and her mother made the banana muffins and they put them nicely onto the plate. And the next day, the little girl went out to the fence and she looked, and there she was on the other end of the fence. So she called her, "Hey, Sharita, come here for a minute." And Sharita came up and she said, "Where you been? I've been looking for you." She said, "My mother told me I need to stay on my side of the fence and not play with you guys on that side of the fence." Well, she said, "Well, my mother baked these banana muffins and she told me to give them to you to give to your mother and tell them it was from us." And she said, "Well, thanks." And so she went on into the house, Sharita did, and she said, "Look, Mommy, the people next door, my friend, Micaiah, and her mother baked these for us." And she said, "Oh, well, that was awfully nice of them." And so they ate the muffins, and then her mother looked around for something she could give them. And so she said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to go out and put some of our nice roses in a vase, and I'll give that to her mother." So her and Sharita, they went outside, and they find the best, beautiful roses they could find, different colors, and they cut them, and they put them down into a pretty nice vase. And she said, "Now, when you go to the fence tomorrow, give these to Micaiah and tell her that they're from her mother over on your mother on the other side of the fence." And so Sharita looked and she looked, and just as soon as she saw Micaiah, she said, "Hey, Micaiah, come here." And so they met each other at the fence, and my mother picked these roses and she told me to give them to your mother and tell her thank you for the banana muffins. They were so delicious. And she said, "Okay." So Sharita went and she went into the house. She said, "Look, Mommy, look at these nice roses that you have." And she said, "Where did they come from?" "Our neighbor, Sharita, and her mom cut them." And she said, "Well, that's awfully nice of her." And so they exchanged. That was their first exchange, for 10 years. And then something really strange happened. That family had things in their yard. See, this is out in like a farming community. And they had a tractor. And the next thing you know, that tractor was gone. But then you saw the family out there doing all the work. The husband, the wife, and their 4 kids. And then the husband, Micaiah's father, he noticed. He said, "I wonder what happened to that tractor out there. They don't have a tractor anymore." Hmm. And so they continue to watch that family, and slowly but slowly, things started disappearing out of their yard. They had 2 horses. They didn't see the horses anymore. And then their garden shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. Like they didn't plant as much as they had. And so the mother and the father, Nakai's mother and father said, hey, talk to your friend Sharita and figure out what's going on and where the horses and the tractor and why is the garden so small? And she said, well, Daddy, I'll see, but I don't know. We don't talk about stuff like that. And so the 2 girls are out by the fence, and Sharita says, hey, what are you guys going to do with your tractor? It's gone. And she said, oh, my parents had to sell it. They said we need the money to keep paying the bills on the farm. She said, oh, okay. Oh, what about the horses? You guys don't have the horses anymore? Yeah, we sold them for the same reason. My parents said hard times happen to everybody. And Nakia said, okay. And so that night at dinner, Nakia, her mother, and her father and her siblings, they sat at the table. And her father said, so what did you find out about the tractor? She said, well, Sharita told me that her parents said that everybody falls on hard times sometimes. And that's why they got rid of the tractor and the horses and everything like that for money. Father said, okay. So that night, when Sharita went to bed, when Nakia went to bed, her parents got together and said, hey, what do you think about that? Our neighbors are having a hard time over there. But, you know, over here, on this side of the fence, every time somebody has a hard time, we get together to help them out. Now, I know they're not the friendliest people in the world, but do you think we should go over and see if they need some help? Maybe help them with our tractor? Maybe help them out a little bit? She says, well, we never know. Maybe they just don't want anybody in their business. So the next day, when Nakia went to the fence, her parents went with her because they noticed that Sharita's parents were in the yard. Nakia said, hey, Sharita. Hey. And Sharita came over to the fence. Hi. And she said, this is my mom and my dad. They'd like to meet your parents. And so Sharita said, well, I don't know. My mom and dad are not that friendly. And Nakia's dad said, well, go and ask them to come over to the fence and talk to us. And that's exactly what she did. And so for the first time in over 10 years, Sharita's mom and dad and Nakia's mom and dad were at that fence together. And Nakia's dad says, how you doing? He introduced himself and his wife. He says, I'm not trying to get into your business, neighbor friend, but I noticed that your tractor's not out there anymore. He said, oh, no, I sold it. And he says, oh, well, I noticed your field is a little small there, needs a little turning over. And so Sharita's dad said, yeah, well, we'll figure it out. I got my family. He says, but neighbor, how about if I let you use my tractor, or if you don't mind, I can come over and run that tractor for you, and that way you can put more things out, and maybe it'll increase your profits a little bit. And so Sharita's dad looked at his dad, and he looked out at that field, and he looked at his family, and he thought how tired he's been lately from trying to do it all. And he reached across the fence and they shook hands. Sure, I could use the help. So he went on across that fence, and the next day, and Nakia's dad, he took his plow over there, and while they were over there, they said, hey, you need anything else done? And he says, well, actually, we're almost in danger of losing the farm that's been in my family for years and years, and we don't really know what to do. And Nakia's dad said, well, we'll think about that. So they shook hands, parted company, the field was all plowed, they went home. Well, Nakia's dad went to all the neighbors that evening. He called them all and asked them to come and meet at his porch. And he told them what was going on with that family over there, how they had fallen on hard times, and they needed the help of their neighbor friends. And so they all got together and they said, hey, those people never speak to us. Those people never help anybody. And they've had their noses up on everybody for years and years, and now we're supposed to go over there and help them? And Nakia's dad said, that's exactly what we're supposed to do. We don't base being good neighbors on whether somebody was nice or not to us. Good neighbors help. And they all thought about it. They said, sure. Go on and ask them what they need. We're all in. Whatever they need, we'll help them like we always help everybody here on this side of the fence. And so the next day, Nikaya's dad went knocking. Sharita's dad came out, and he explained to him what had happened the night before, how the neighbors were willing to get together and help out. And he said, you know what? I sure would appreciate that. And hey, I'm so sorry for all the times we didn't talk. It's just that I grew up on this farm and we never did talk. And so I just kind of kept that going, but I didn't really want to. It's just that's the way that it is. And Nikaya's dad said, oh no, sir. That's the way it was. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. And so Sharita's mom and dad got up early like they always do to get ready for a day's work. And all the neighbors came in and they said they started with the field. And they even had seeds to help plant more. And then they fixed up and they put things back together. And by that evening at sundown, boy, they had put in a lot of hard work. And they decided to eat dinner together, and those old neighbors had become quick friends. Yeah. And it went on and on like that until Sharita's family were back up on their feet, and Nees had gained a new friend by helping out. So what do you think about that story? Sharita and Nikaya, that old fence that was separating them, they knocked it down. They built, because it was too hard to keep going around that fence every time they needed to bring something back and forth. Yeah? And so once the harvest came in, Sharita's family and all the other families, they got together and they had dinner together. And from that time on, they weren't old neighbors. They were new, good friends. So stop to think about that. Sometimes we draw borders that really should be knocked down. Had her father been very prideful or continued to go on with his tradition of not speaking to certain people or not being friends with those people, he might have lost that farm. Yeah. What do you have in your life that you might lose, really lose, when all you had to do was make a new friend out of an old neighbor or somebody who's been there the whole time? You never know unless you try. With that, friends, I want you to stop and think about it and have a good rest of your day. This is Miss Nikki's Traveling Story Bag checking out. I'll be back at you again with another lunchtime story. Bye-bye.